Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Mother. How are you?
I am doing good, Prabhu. How was your marriage?
My
Your
marriage,
son's
I got
marriage.
married a long time ago.
Oh, it's done?
I got married almost 46, 7 years
Not
ago.
you, Prabhu, your son's.
My
Sorry,
son, I
I
think it
correct.
was your marriage. That's very nice. Thank you so much.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Again.
Thank you very much. And I see Neeta Mataji, Nandapatni Mataji, Hare Krishna. I see Sunana Mataji, Hare Krishna. I see Mary Mataji, Hare Krishna.
Krishna Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. I see Alesh there, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna and congratulations, Prabhu.
Thank you, beta. Thank you. How are you?
Excellent, Prabhu. Thank you very much for asking. How are you?
Very good, very good.
Good to see you again.
Yeah, still a lot of things to do,
Oh,
but not as bad as last week. But Krishna's mercy, things went well.
good to
Hare
hear.
Krishna Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much. How are you doing?
Good Prabhuji. How are you? And how is
Good.
family and everybody?
Everybody's great. Just a little bit tired, but otherwise fine.
Yeah, that's
but
true, Prabhu.
it was a lot of fun because both my daughters and my son and his wife and her husband, they were all here. So it was a lot of fun.
That's good. The whole family is together.
Yeah, right. It doesn't often happen. So that was great.
I know.
Yeah. Yeah. Hare Krishna Krishna.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
How are you?
I'm good, Prabhuji.
It's good. Radha Vinod Prabhu, Hare Krishna. Mahajan Prabhu, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Mother. How are you?
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Radhika Vinod Prabhu, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
And I see Radhika Patel there. Haribol, how are you?
How are you? I'm good. How are you?
Good. Long time no see, huh?
Yeah, busy with work a couple of weeks. But congratulations to Gopal.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Thank you.
हमने कहा बहुत बिजी होंगे हमने आपको बॉदर ही नहीं किया
Thank you, Mother. Thank you so much.
प्रभु जी
हाँ जी
हरि प्रसाद चले गए हैं कि इधर ही हैं?
अभी हैं.
तो चेहरा तो दिखा दो प्लीज.
हाँ
चेहरा दिखा दो.
फेस दिखा दो कैसे?
वो अपने कॉल पे हैं लेकिन.
ओके आफ्टर कॉल.
After call, sure, for sure, yeah.
थैंक यू.
For sure.
Hare Krishna ji. Hare Krishna.
Prabhu, Haribol, how are you?
Good, good, good.
हरे कृष्ण प्रभु.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Rampriya Prabhu, how are you doing?
Good प्रभु. How are you?
Good.
Hare Krishna to everybody. Hare Krishna to all the devotees.
हरे कृष्ण जी. हरे कृष्ण.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna to all the Vaishnava Acharyas.
Vaishnavacharya से जय हो.
जय.
So I'm just going to put the Pranami mantra on.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.
Just 1 second. There you go. Okay. So I'm going to share the screen and put the Pranami mantra up. And who's going to sing the Pranami mantras today?
I can do it, Prabhu.
Oh, go ahead, Prabhu. Please go ahead.
Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatari Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंदा हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे वंशाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्येव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः
Jai Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Thank you, Prabhu. Okay, who remembers what we talked about 2 weeks ago?
Today we are
Amrish.
Yes, very nice. Thank you, Mataji. Thank you. So, any questions from 2 weeks ago before you go to this week? Okay, that's all right. So, we'll start this week. And actually, in a way, this is an interesting week because most of the things we talk about are small, short, I should say, short stories about different personalities um, in the Sun Dynasty. So, having talked about um, King Ambrish 2 weeks ago, today we are going to talk about um, the descendants of King Ambrish. So, the whole dynasty that is there. We'll discuss. I mean, of course, we'll skip all the names because, frankly, I cannot remember any names. So, whatever I can, we'll do that. So, one of the descendants of King Ambrish was a person by the name of Yuvanashva. He had 100 wives, but unfortunately, no sons. So he entered the forest to where all these sages were residing and requested them to perform a fire sacrifice. And this particular fire sacrifice is known as Indra Yagya. So, in other words, Indra is the beneficiary of this fire sacrifice. Obviously, it's a karma kanda, but that's what he wanted to do. So, he'll have a son as powerful as Indra himself. So, the fire sacrifice was going on. And one day, like this fire sacrifice is not 1 hour affair like we have today. They would go on for days, sometimes months, sometimes for years. Does anybody remember how long did Lord Ramchandra perform his fire sacrifice?
Prabhu, I heard 13,000 years.
Yes, Prabhu, 13,000 years. So that's not a small amount of time. So he performed for 13,000 years. This one, it doesn't say how long it was, but longer than a few days, obviously. So one day, the king was, there and he got very thirsty. And he got so thirsty that he saw a jug, a pot, I should say, a pot of water, and he drank from it. And then he was told that, look, this water and this pot was kept for performing the yajna, and it was meant to be drunk by his wife so she may have a child. So it's like the charu that, was produced when King Dasharatha was performing his fire sacrifice. And the charu was given to the wives and they became pregnant. And so many other similar stories of something was produced in a fire sacrifice, given to the wife to have a child. But a man, this king, drank this thing. So after a while, he actually got pregnant. And he carried it for, I don't know, 100 years or something like that. And finally, trying to remember, some particular sage came, probably Vasishtha Muni, and he performed a cesarean operation on the right side of the king's abdomen and produced a child. As soon as the child was born, like he came out of the abdomen of of the king, Yuvanashwa, he started to cry for milk. The baby is always looking for the breast milk of his mother, but there is no mother here, and the king cannot produce breast milk. So he was wondering what to do. Then Indra was there. He felt real compassion for him, and he gave the child his index finger to suck on, which produced the milk. So it is said that all the demigods have milk flowing in their body. I don't know whether it's in the veins or there's no blood, I'm not sure, but it's said that milk flows in their body. So the milk was coming out of the finger of Indra that the baby was sucking on, and he became very healthy. It is also said that it was so healthy, that the milk, that he started growing like crazy. In 12 days, excuse me, his body became as big as a normal 12-year-old child. Anyway, so it is said that because Indra was basically the nurse of this baby, he was given the name Mandhata. Mandhata later became a very famous emperor, and he ruled the entire earth. And he was so tough on any thieves or rogues in the kingdom that they became so afraid of this powerful king Mandhata that Mandhata was given another name called Trasdasyu, which means the rogues and the dacoits are so scared of him. They're trasit, which basically means scared of him and harassed by him, and always in difficulty with him. So excuse me, I'm sorry. Anyway, so Mandhata had 3 sons, and first one was what is it called? Purukutsa. And then, of course, famous Ambarish Maharaj and Muchkund. And I'm sorry, not the same Ambarish Maharaj. He's an ancestor, but another child named Ambarish, and Muchkund, who's also very famous. And he had 50 daughters. And we'll talk about the story of these 50 daughters, how they chose one husband. So that takes us to the story of Sobhari Rishi. Now, Sobhari Rishi is very famous for the pastime that we're going to talk about. He was actually performing severe austerities under Yamuna water in a place which has now become famous as Kaliyada. So, this is before Kaliya came there, so I'm just telling you the context. Anyway, so what happened was that all these fish were there, and I may also tell you the story about why Kaliya came there. So basically what happened was that Kaliya was the son of a woman by the name of Kadru, and all her children were serpents. They used to live in a place called Nagalaya. And Garuda would go there every once in a while, and he started killing serpents. And he would kill some and eat some, like was being really a nuisance to all these serpents. So they all approached Garuda and said, this is too much. Can we make some kind of compromise? What if every 15 days we gave you one serpent as offering to you? So you come, you accept the offering, you eat that serpent, and leave the rest of us alone. So he agreed, and what was I going to say? And this was going on. Kaliya, Vasuki, they were some of the chief serpents at that time. So Kaliya once said, I'm strong, I got thousands of hoods, I can beat this Garuda guy, so why should we continue to offer him? So what he did was, next time a serpent was offered, and they used to put it under a tree. So he went and ate that serpent himself and waited for Garuda to come. So Garuda came and he realized what had happened. So he attacked, Kaliya. So Kaliya attacked, Garuda back, with thousands of hoods and very poisonous hoods. He thought he will bite Garuda and beat him. But Garuda used his wings to beat the heck out of Kalia, and Kalia had to run, and Garuda was chasing him. So the Kalia had heard a story about Saubhari Muni. So as I said, he was performing austerities underwater, and all this fish was swimming around him. So Garuda started coming there also, and he started eating the fish. And every day he'll eat like thousands of them. And one day he picked up the chief of the fish, which was very huge, and started flying away with it. So all the fish went to Saubhari Muni and they said, "You're very powerful, we take your shelter, and please save us from Garuda." So Saubhari Muni addressed Garuda and said, "Please stop harassing them, return that big fish, the king of the fish, and don't come here to eat them." And Garuda was kind of a little puffed up, and he said, "Who are you to tell me not to do that? I'm going to come and eat anyway." And he started eating more fish. So Saubhari Muni got so angry, he cursed him. And he said that if you ever come back here, then you will die. Like you'll die right away. And so Garuda left, saying, "Okay, fine, I won't come back." But this was an offense to a pure devotee. So he had to suffer the result of that. So what happened was, one day Saubhari Muni was sitting under the water, performing his austerities, and he saw two fish enjoying each other's association. And he actually became, sexually agitated upon seeing this scene. And he decided that he wanted to have a woman also. So he got up, came out of the water, and at that time Mandhata was the king, whom we just talked about. And he went to him and he said that, "My dear king, I would like to marry one of your daughters." Remember, I said 50 daughters of Mandhata. Now Mandhata was in a real quandary. He can't say no to a powerful sage like Saubhari Muni, but which daughter of his would want to marry somebody like this? And why would he want to sacrifice one of his daughters for somebody like this? So he said, "Oh, my dear Brahman, you know how things are these days. My daughters want to pick their own husband. But knowing who you are, probably any one of them will be happy to pick you as her husband. So you know what? Why don't you go inside the inner chambers of the palace and we go meet with them, and whichever one picks you is fine with me." Thinking, why would any of my daughters pick him? But Saubhari Muni was no ordinary yogi. He understood what Mandhata was thinking. Immediately he understood that. So he said, "Okay, fine. You're thinking I'm now feeble, I'm old, I'm decrepit, my hair is gone, or whatever is left is gray, my skin is slack, my head is always trembling, my hands are trembling, and then I'm a yogi, have been sitting under the water for so many years. So why would anybody want to marry me? And obviously no woman would want to marry me. But the king has been very smart and rejected me, so I should change my body. I'll become a very young, handsome, powerful person, so good looking that even the apsaras, the celestial women, would choose me as a husband. And let me see, how any daughter of this king rejects me." So he turned himself into a young, handsome person, and the servants of the king took him the inner chambers of the palace to meet these 50 girls. All these 50 princesses, when they saw this handsome man, they said, "Oh, I want to marry him. No, I want to marry him. No, I want to marry him." And they started to quarrel. One said, "He saw me first." Other said, No, but I saw him first." Other one said, No, he's more suitable to my taste. I'm more qualified to marry him. Like that. They were fighting. So Saubhari Rishi said, "Don't fight. and he expanded himself into 50 forms and married each one of the 50 girls. And they started living in this palace that Saubhari Muni built with his own yogic powers, a very opulent palace. It had, all sorts of parks, it had clear water lakes, gardens, full of ornaments and jewels and garments and, bedrooms and amazing bathrooms with jacuzzis are nothing, with amazing jacuzzis and all those kind of things. Basically, very opulent paraphernalia. And he started living a family life with all his 50 wives. And basically, he lived like that for very, very long time. And he still was not satisfied. Prabhupada says that, if you try to put a fire out by pouring ghee on it, the clarified butter, you'll never cease the blazing of the fire. So Saubhari Muni realized that sense gratification is not the end of sense gratification. So he was sitting there in a secluded place thinking about, what have I done? I have fallen down from where I was to this situation just because I got interested in affairs with women, and I saw two fish doing this and I wanted to do the same thing. And I had offended the devotee of the Lord, Garuda. So he basically came to the conclusion that, look, if I want to get out of this material bondage, if I want to get out of this material world, I have to get rid of my association with people interested in sex life. And I should stop all my sense gratification now. So he said, I got to fix my mind under the lotus feet of Supreme Personality of Godhead and associate only with people who are similarly engaged in fixing their mind on the Supreme Personality of Godhead and go away from there. So he told his wives that, you know what, enough of all this sense gratification. We already have 100 sons each from each one of you, 5,000, children. That's enough. And, I've really fallen down from where I was in my elevated position of a yogi. I don't like where I am now. I don't like my current situation. I don't have any further desire for sense enjoyment because frankly, there's no end to it. So I got to leave. And they said, we agree with you, but we will come with you also because we have had enough as well. So all the 50 wives followed Saubhari Rishi to the forest and they engaged the service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and all of them entered the spiritual world. So I'm going to stop here for a minute and see if there are any questions or comments from any one of you before I proceed further.
Yeah. Prabhuji, I have a question.
Yes, Prabhuji.
Yeah, so normally we think of a Siddha, the one is a Siddha, right? He can expand to 10, but here Saurabha Rishi could expand to 50.
So what's the question, Prabhu?
So is it any that the sadhakas or siddhas, those who achieve, they can expand to anything or there is a limit that they can expand? That's my question.
So first of all, only some can.
Okay.
Not all siddhas can because this is a particular type of mystic perfection. So not just any. So that's first thing. Second thing is 50 is the limit. But there's one other restriction. It's like if you watch TV and if you put the same channel on 50 different TVs, you get the same image, same thing happening on all screens. So unlike Krishna, who expanded it to 16,108 forms, who could work independently, as we know from the past time, Saubhari Muni's 50 forms could not act independently. They all did the same thing at the same time. So that's the other further restriction they have. So yes, they can expand, but it's a very limited expansion.
Limited, okay. Yeah, thank you.
Sure. Anyone else?
Hare Krishna Prabhu, I have a question.
Yes, Prabhuji, go ahead, Ram Prabhu.
You mentioned like Muni's wives also entered into the spiritual world, right? But actually, because of Muni's power, I mean, the earlier whatever he has gained, and based on that, he had a power to enter into the spiritual world. But how wives also, because they might not have done the same kind of austerities like the Muni, but still they also got this similar power to enter into the spiritual world. Like how it can happen.
Yes, Prabhu. So Saubhari Muni did not have the power to enter the spiritual world by his mystic yoga performances. He was not a devotee. But after this experience with the 50 wives, he became a devotee and performed for thousands of years. He performed devotional service. And the wives did with him. And then they became eligible to go to the spiritual world. Not because of his previous yogic experience.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. Anyone else? Okay, then I'll move on to the next chapter. Excuse me. So now we'll talk about, in this next chapter, chapter 7 actually, the descendants of King Mandhata himself. So we just talked about the daughters of King Mandhata. Now we'll talk about his sons. And that's how the dynasty moves forward. So one of his descendants, not the son, but I think great-great-grandson, was named Satyavrat. Satyavrat is not the same Satyavrat that we talked about in the fish incarnation story. This is a different Satyavrat. Satyavrat is actually more famous as Trishanku. Some of you may have heard that name. And the story is that Trishanku or Satyavrat once kidnapped the daughter of a Brahmin. And the father got so upset, he cursed him for this sinful act to become a Chandal. Chandal is like even lower than Shudras. When Trishanku realized that he had been cursed, he went to Vasishtha Muni for help and said, this is what has happened, so can you please help me so I'm not a Chandal anymore. And Vasishtha Muni said, no, you deserve this curse, you deserve this punishment, I'm not going to help you. So disappointed, he went to Vishwamitra, who had been performing his austerities for 50,000 years. Not 1 or 2 years, not 1 or 2 minutes, 50,000 years. Trishanku was aware of the enmity between Vishwamitra and Vasishtha Muni. And there's a whole long story of that. Because of the Kamdhenu, the cow, I'm trying to remember the English word for that cow, desire-fulfilling cow. There was a big fight among them and they became enemies. So Trishanku knew that Vasishtha Muni and Vishwamitra don't get along. Actually, they are sworn enemies. So he used that card and told Vishwamitra how Vasishtha had refused to help him. And immediately Vishwamitra said, oh, really? Is that so? Vasishtha will not help you? Don't worry, I will help you. And Trishanku said, well, my desire is to go to heavenly kingdom in this body. I forgot to say that that was also the request that Trishanku had made to Vasishtha Muni, along with not being a Chandala anymore, and Vasishtha Muni had refused. But Vishwamitra said, yeah, I'll send you to the heavenly kingdom in this very body, don't worry. And so, like a rocket, Trishanku started shooting up towards the heavenly kingdom. Indra, the king of the demigods, sitting on his throne in the heavenly kingdom, he noticed this rocket coming his way very fast. So he asked somebody, hey, what's this rocket? And somebody told him, no, it's not a rocket. It's a person by the name of Trishanku. He's being sent by the yogic power of Vishwamitra to be in the heavenly kingdom in his current body. And Indra said, well, he can't do that. And he used his power, Indra used his power to stop Trishanku from ascending anymore. And he tried to force him down. So here was Indra forcing him down, and there was Vishwamitra pushing him up. So Trishanku basically got caught or stuck in the middle. He can't go up, he cannot go down. He cannot go up because of Indra pushing him down, and he could not go down because of Vishwamitra pushing him up. So actually, there he is stuck in the space. So actually this led to a very popular proverb or saying in India, which I'm going to say it in Hindi, then I'll translate this, which says that Trishanku ki tarah latak gaye, which means that now you're caught in the middle and you cannot go this way or that way. And actually it is said that Trishanku is still dangling somewhere in the space upside down. I was thinking that maybe one of these satellites that go to the space station can find him and grab him and kind of rid him of his misery. But I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. Anyway, so that was the story of Trishanku. Trishanku had a son by the name of Harishchandra, who's a very famous king in our scriptures. So once Harishchandra performed a Raj Suya Yagya, same kind of yagya that Yudhishthira Maharaj was performing, King Prithu was performing. So it's a very popular yagya for the kings to perform. But Vishwamitra very cunningly took his all his positions as a dakshina, which is the charity that you pay to the Brahman who's performing the yagya ceremony. And having taken all that, he started to chastise Harishchandra in many different ways. Because of this, the Vasishtha, who was also there, started to fight with Vishwamitra. There was a big, huge fight between Vishwamitra and Vasishtha. So anyway, Harishchandra couldn't do anything about this, but he had no sons. So on the advice of Narad Muni, he worshipped a demigod by the name of Varuna. Does anybody know what's the responsibility of Varuna?
Wind god?
No, that's Vayu.
So,
Water, very good. Yes, water. So he's the water god basically. So he worshipped Varuna, and by his mercy, and upon the promise that whichever son is born, he will use that son as a sacrifice to perform a Varuna Yagya, which is a Yagya where Varuna is the beneficiary. And with that promise, he was able to get the blessings of Varuna to have a son. So finally, he did, and he named his son Rohit. So when the child was born, Varuna came back and said, hey, remember you promised me that when your son is born, you will use him as a sacrifice in the fire yagya, where I'll be the beneficiary. But you know how things go. The king Harishchandra became very attached to his son as soon as he saw his face. It's easy to promise to sacrifice him when you don't know what he looks like. He doesn't physically exist. But once you have held him in your hands, affection and attachment becomes very natural. So the king Harishchandra gave various arguments to Varuna to avoid sacrificing his son. First time Varuna had come, upon birth of the son, Harishchandra said, my dear sir, an animal becomes fit to be sacrificed only 10 days after the birth. Until then, he's impure. So he's not fit to be sacrificed. So Varuna said, no problem, I can wait 10 days. So after 10 days, he came back. And said, Harishchandra, now you can perform the sacrifice? And Harishchandra said, well, when animal grows teeth, then it becomes pure enough to be sacrificed. So Varuna said, okay, fine, I'm patient, I'll wait. When the teeth grew, Varuna came back. And he said to Harishchandra, well, now the animal has grown teeth. Now you can perform the sacrifice. And Harishchandra replied Well, when all his teeth, like what they call in Hindi, doodh ke daant, which means the milk teeth, the first original teeth, when all his teeth have fallen out, then he will be fit for sacrifice. So we said, okay, I'm a patient man, I'll wait. So when the teeth fell out, Varuna came back. I said to Harishchandra, now the teeth have fallen out. Now you can perform the sacrifice. But Harishchandra had another excuse. He said, when the teeth grow in again, like the new teeth, the second set, then he will be pure enough to be sacrificed. But I said, okay, I'm a patient man. I'll wait. The teeth grew again. Varuna came back and said, Harishchandra, now you can perform the sacrifice. But now Harishchandra said, my dear sir, when the sacrificial animal becomes a Kshatriya and is able to shield himself to fight with the enemy, then he will be purified. So obviously he was so attached to his son that he was giving all these excuses, and he kept asking Varuna to wait on one pretense or the other because of his affection. And Varuna was very patient. He waited and waited and waited for the right time. Well, by now Rohit, the son, had grown up enough to understand that his father was obliged to offer him as the animal for sacrifice. So he didn't want to be sacrificed. So to save himself from this death, he equipped himself with, bow and arrow and other weapons, and he went to the forest. When he went over the forest, Varuna finally realized that, look, Harishchandra is not going to keep his promise. And he cursed him to suffer from a disease called dropsy. And dropsy is a disease where a man's stomach or abdomen grows very large, like more, or I should say larger than a 9-month-old pregnant woman. So that's what happened to him, which is a very painful situation and very embarrassing position. So the news reached Rohit, who was in the forest, that his father was suffering because of him. So he said, you know what? I don't care for my life. I don't want my father to suffer like this. So I'll come back to the kingdom and be the sacrifice animal. But Indra was watching all this. So he came in the disguise of a Brahmin and said to him, you should first travel to all these different pilgrimages and all the holy places before you do that. So he did that for a whole year, came back and they said, no, you got to do that more. So second year, third year, fourth year, fifth year, and they kept pushing him back to do more pilgrimage. But after 6 years, Rohit said, I don't care what you want me to do. I'm going home because my father is suffering. So as he was walking to his kingdom, I don't know how far it was, but obviously far enough. He was walking, he ran into a Brahmin who was very, very poor. His name was Ajigarth. And what was I going to say? Harishchandra talked to Ajigarth and said, you look so poor and all that. He said, yes. And he introduced himself that he's his wife, his 3 sons. And Rohit had an idea. He said, what if I give you 100 cows in return for one of your children? Then you will no longer starve, and you'll have enough, wealth with the 100 cows to never starve again. But in return, I would like you to give me one of your sons to be used as sacrifice. And Ajigarth said, you know what? I'm so starved, I'm so poor, I'm so poverty stricken. I'll agree to your offer, but I'm very attached to my eldest son, eldest of the 3. So I can't offer him that. And his wife spoke up and she said, I'm very attached to the youngest one. There's no way I'll give him that to you. So the middle child was offered and he said, that's fine. To save you from poverty and starvation, I'll be willing to be sacrificed. and he agreed to be sold to Rohit in exchange for 100 cows for his father Ajigarth. His name was Shunashepa. I hope I'm pronouncing it right, Shunashepa. And they went to the palace. There's another side story that's not in Bhagavatam, but I read somewhere else, which says that on the way, he actually met Vishwamitra, I think Vishwamitra, and who took a real liking to, I can't even say it right, Shunashepa. And anyway, that's all that happened, that Vishwamitra developed a liking for him. And he finally, Rohit and Shunashepa reached the royal palace. They met Rohit's father, Harishchandra, and they invited Varun and said, will you accept a replacement for my son with this Brahmin boy? He's a very worthy substitute for a Kshatriya boy. And Varuna agreed. So King Harishchandra performed another Rajya ceremony where he was going to sacrifice this child who was not his, for satisfying Varun. But when the Brahmins, and I should point out, Vasishtha was one of the Brahmins, Jamdagni was another Brahmin, was the father of Parashuram. Who else was there? Vishwamitra, of course, he was there, and there's somebody else, one other person was there. 4 Brahmins are required for various aspects of fire sacrifice. And they said, no way we're going to bind this boy to the sacrificial post. And the father of Shunashepa was still there, Ajigartha. He said, that's okay. I will bind my son if you give me another 100 cows. So Rohit completely agreed, very quickly agreed to give another 100 cows. And Ajigarth bound his own son, middle son, to the post. But the priest still refused to slaughter him now. So Ajigarth then offered to sacrifice his own son in exchange for another 100 cows. So Rohit accepted that offer also, and Ajigarth was ready to kill his own son. Oh, I forgot to mention that when this boy had met Vishwamitra on his way to the palace, Vishwamitra gave him a couple of hymns from Rigveda to chant. And so this boy started chanting those hymns, Vedic hymns from Rigveda, and invoked a deity of the dawn, which is known as Usha. And as soon as he did that, his bonds were loosened. The king, Harishchandra, was cured of illness, and Varuna said, I don't need to get this sacrifice. So Shunashepa was released, and Vishwamitra, who developed a liking for him, offered to adopt him as his eldest son. Well, then there was a family issue. Vishwamitra had many sons, and Vishwamitra said, you will be my eldest son. And so his youngest sons, they accepted this adopted boy, I'm not going to bother saying the name, as his elder brothers, but the oldest ones said, no, we're not accepting him as our elder brother. So Vishwamitra actually cursed his own sons and exiled them out of Aryavart, which is where they were living. India is part of that. And so they had to go away someplace. And this whole description of the dynasties, I'm not very good with names, so I'm not going to bother saying that. Anyway, I hope it's not too complicated, this story. Very intriguing, how a father would be willing to sacrifice his own son for a few cows, or how a king would be willing to sacrifice somebody else's son to save his own son. Anyway, I'm going to pause again Hopefully it was clear, not too confusing. If there are any questions or clarifications you want, we can do that now. Nothing? Was it because so confusing? What's the use of asking? Or was it so crystal clear?
Prabhuji.
Radha Vinod Prabhu, yes.
Yeah, so, very interesting story, but what is the message for us from here? Too many complicated stories, one into another.
So I'm glad you asked. So what is the message? What is the message in these stories, and why are these stories in Srimad Bhagavatam? Right? So I'm going to turn around and ask one of you to answer the question. What is the message, and why are stories like this in Srimad Bhagavatam?
I just know that Bhagavatam is full of God's story, Lord's stories, and his devotees, right? That's all Bhagavatam is about, devotees and the Lord.
But these people don't sound like devotees to me.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
And the Lord wasn't there.
Yeah. So generally, all is like we say Bhagavatam is full of devotees, but here I don't even see that. Yeah.
Correct. So back to you the question. Why is it in Bhagavatam? And what's the message?
One I can see is material happiness, want son, this and that. Finally, no one is with you. So in one of the Rishi, he turned into 50 forms and he married, and at the end, he said, this is nothing, this life is nothing, and I go back to spiritual world again. So from there, I can find that material world doesn't give you happiness.
Okay, that was the first story, I guess, the Sobhari Rishi. But what about this story about Harishchandra and Rohit?
Because of not keeping the promise.
True. So what's the message? And why is it in Srimad Bhagavatam? It's not about devotees.
Be truthful.
I'm sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
Be truthful always.
I'm sorry, Prabhu?
Be truthful always.
Okay, all right.
Prabhuji, for me, I think this tells us that how after worshipping the Lord of Water, Varun Dev, that brings so much of misery only to the king. So instead, one should be worshipping the Supreme Lord.
Yes. So basically, the message is, here is the stark difference between pure devotees and materialistic people. The thought process, the actions, so much sense gratification, and lack of complete compassion. Complete lack of compassion. So here was Harishchandra to save his son. He was willing to lie and cheat. He had no qualms about sacrificing somebody else's son to save his son. So it's selfishness. The father of this boy was exchanged for Rohit. I'm sorry, I just can't say that name. Anyway, was willing to sacrifice his son for the sake of few cows. So he will not starve. So again, for his selfish interest, he's willing to sacrifice his own son, and on and on and on. So this is the mentality of materialistic people. And the message for us is to understand the consequences of doing that, the karmic reactions of all that, and why we should not be doing that. The reason it is in Srimad Bhagavatam is to again emphasize the point about the contrast between pure devotees and materialistic people. And the message is, don't be like the materialistic people, because not only you'll be stuck in the material world, there's no real happiness, and you'll be continuing to do selfish, discompassionate acts without care for who's getting hurt, who's not. So very, very important messages. It's like, what a devotee should not do. So sometimes they tell you what they should do, sometimes they tell you what they should not do. Yam and niyam, the do's and the don'ts. Okay. Does that make sense?
Yes, Prabhuji. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, any other questions before I move on to the next chapter? Okay, so now very interesting part is coming, which is the...
Prabhuji, I have a question.
Hi, please, go ahead.
So, like, how do we know that this part of Bhagavatam is like to be followed and this part not to be followed?
I think, Prabhuji, should be obvious. Like, given, for example, yourself, given your background, I think, as soon as you read it, your reaction would be, that's not what I want to do. This is not, using the local expression, this is not kosher. This is not the right behavior. The sense gratification, the worship of the demigods leads to further bondage in the material world. Here we are trying to get out of it. And doing those activities entangles us even further. Therefore, it's a no-no. Right? So, I mean, the message is rather easily concluded. It's so obvious, it's almost blatant. Right? Anyone else?
Okay.
Okay, all right.
Prabhuji, can I say something to Prabhuji's question?
Oh, please do, yes.
So I just wanted to add, I know you won't say it by yourself, so I just wanted to add that to Prabhuji's question, that since we all are Baddha Jivas, so we have the tendency to misunderstand the stories and their teachings. So that's why it is said that we should always hear Bhagavatam from a devotee and not from a material person. So that is how we will know what to do and what not to do.
Okay, so present case accepted. I guess you're hearing from not a devotee, but
no. That's why I said. That's why I said that you won't say. That's why I dared to add. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you. I was just going to defend myself by saying that as long as I keep repeating what Prabhupada has said, I'm safe.
That's right.
The moment I start deviating from what Prabhupada said or adding my own stuff, then there's a problem.
So as Prabhupada always compares hearing Harikatha or especially Bhagavatam from the material people is like the poison milk, which will look like a milk, but it will have poisonous effects later. So that is how we can misunderstand what to do, what not to do. But if we are hearing it from a Vaishnava, we are in safe hands.
Yes.
Thank you. Jai.
Okay, all right. Now, very interesting story about the appearance of Mother Ganges on earth. So we are going down the line of this dynasty. So we talked about Ambarish Maharaj, we talked about Mandata, we talked about Rohit. Now we're going to talk about the son of Rohit. His name was Bahuk. Bahuk was a very strange character. Like, he was the son of a king like Rohit, but he was so harassed by his enemies and so greatly disturbed by their activities that he actually left his throne, he left his home with his wife and went to a forest. And basically he gave up his body in the forest. And I think he had 100 wives also. He also had 100 wives, I think. And I'm not 100% sure he had 100 wives, but I think it was 100. Anyway, so when he gave his body, one of his wives wanted to follow the sati pratha, which is, the wife enters the pyre, the funeral pyre of the husband, and give up her life that way. But when she was about to do that, there was a sage there by the name of Aurva. I think it's Aurva. Aurva. He stopped her. He said, no, you can't go. You're pregnant. She didn't even know. He said, no, I'm telling you, you're pregnant. So you cannot enter the fire because otherwise you'll kill your own son. So she didn't. Now, and a few months passed, but the co-wives of, Bahuk they got jealous that, we're not pregnant. How come she got pregnant? And so they gave her poison with her food. And but before she died, she was in a lot of pain. So I'm not sure what mechanism was used, but she was able to deliver the child. So because the son was born with poison in his body, he was named Sagar. So Sa means with and Gar means poison. So this means that this is a boy with poison in his body. So that's how the name Sagar came. And anyway, I'll come back to the point I was going to make. Anyway, when this son grew up, the sage Aurva, who had saved his life basically, was still with him. And sage Aurva instructed Sagar to perform an Ashwamedh Yajna. Ashwamedh Yajna is where you sacrifice a horse. And as you know, time and again, Indra keeps getting nervous when somebody performs 100 Ashwamedh Yajnas, because he thinks that now this person has become eligible for my throne and he will take my throne. So again, as he did with King Prithu, he did again here, and he stole the horse. And he left it in a place which was the hermitage of Kapil Dev. Same Kapil Dev was Lord Kapil Dev, who had given these wonderful instructions in Canto 3 to his mother, Devahuti. So he left the horse there, disappeared himself. So, I mean, one of the rules is that if somebody steals the horse, you got to find the horse. So King Sagar, who had two wives, one's name was Sumati, and the other was named Keshini. Sumati had 60,000 sons, and they were, very proud of their prowess and strength and all that. So they said, we'll find the horse. And they looked everywhere, they couldn't find the horse, so they started digging a tunnel on the surface of the earth, and they basically dug a huge trench that is now known as Ganga Sagar. Anyway, so through this trench they traveled, and finally they came upon the place which was the hermitage of Lord Kapil Dev. When they got there, Lord Kapil Dev was sitting, eyes closed, meditating. And they also saw the horse grazing nearby. So as soon as they saw the horse and this personality sitting there with eyes closed, they automatically assumed that this is the person who stole the horse, and now is pretending to be a sadhu. So they got very angry and they took their weapons out and they attacked, or rather rushed to attack Kapil Muni. But because Kapil Muni is Lord, this was such a big offense that all of them were burned to ashes by a fire that emanated from their own bodies. Now I want to add that a lot of people think that Kapil Dev cursed them to die and burn, but he didn't. He's in mode of pure goodness. He doesn't do any of this thing. But because of their offense, automatically a fire appeared from their bodies and burned them to ashes. Well, of course, then nobody returned with the horse, or the sons did return. So they looked at the second wife, Keshini, who had one son. Or at least only one son is mentioned. If she had more, then it's not mentioned. Anyway, his name was Asmanjas. Does anybody know what the word Asmanjas mean in Hindi or Sanskrit?
Confusion.
Confusion, yes. Madhumata, you were going to say the same answer or something different?
In doubt.
In doubt, yes. Yeah, exactly. So basically, Asam, Anjas, where the knowledge is not complete, you don't know whether it's this way or that way. Or the person is confused, people who watch him are also confused. What's going on? So they named him Asmanjas for a very good reason. And basically what happened was this boy, Asmanjas, was a great mystic yogi in his previous birth. But due to bad association, he had fallen down from a exalted position of a yogi, and this time was born in a royal family as the son of King Sagar. But he remembered his previous life. And so therefore, for some reason, like at least I didn't understand from reading the story, and I guess neither did anybody else, and that's why he was named as Manjas, as Mataji explained. So for reasons that nobody understood, Asmanjas wanted to portray himself as a naughty, mischievous, miscreant person. And he would do things that are really totally abominable. That didn't make any sense. Why would you do that? And the entire public of the kingdom was upset with him. You know, what's going on? So the example is given in Srimad Bhagavatam that once there were a bunch of boys playing in the river, river Saryu, because they lived in Ayodhya. And he picked them all up and threw them in the deep water and drowned them and basically killed all the boys. So, I mean, obviously, everyone was very upset. You know, what kind of nonsense is this? His father was very upset when he heard all this, and he exiled him. He said, okay, I don't need you anymore. Get out of this kingdom. But at that time, Asmanjas exhibited his mystic powers, and he revived all the boys and showed them in front of the boys' parents and his father. And having done that, he left Ayodhya, went into exile. But he did have a son, excuse me, whose name was Anshuman. So Anshuman then started searching for the horse. And he followed the same path that his uncles had taken through the Ganga Sagar, the trenches. And finally he reached the ashram of Kapil Dev, where he saw the stack of ashes, which was 60,000 uncles of his, the bones of them, and the horse also was grazing nearby. He also saw Kapil Dev sitting nearby in meditation, and Anshuman was smart, as he offered his prayers to Lord Kapil Dev. Very nice, wonderful prayers, which really pleased Kapil Dev. And so he opened his eyes and he said, you know, here's the horse. I know why you're here. Here's the horse. You take it back to your, grandfather. So Anshuman took the horse, but he didn't move. He stood there with hands folded in front of Lord Kapil Dev. So Kapil Dev could understand that Anshuman is praying now for the deliverance of his uncles. So Kapil Dev said to Anshuman, your uncles can be delivered by the water of Ganges, but Ganges is not here. So you need to bring Ganges to the earth. So when Anshuman heard that, he offered more prayers and his respectful obeisances to Lord Kapil Dev, circumambulated him, and left that place with the horse. And went back to his grandfather Sagar, who finished his yajna. Then he handed over his kingdom to Anshuman, and accepting the advice of his guru Aurva, he went to the forest and ultimately attained salvation. So that's the story of King Sagar and Anshuman. Now, Anshuman's son was a very famous king by the name of Dilip. He tried very hard to bring Ganges to the earth, but he died without success. Dilip's son was Bhagirath. Bhagirath was totally, absolutely determined to bring the Ganges to the earth. And he performed very severe austerities. Finally, Mother Ganges was totally satisfied by the austerities performed by by Bhagirath, and made herself visible, appeared in front of it. And said, I'm happy to give you any benediction you want. So Bhagirath said, please deliver my forefathers. And Mother Ganges said, yeah, I've given a benediction. So I agree. I will come down. I'll come down to earth. But do you know how far I'm falling? Does anybody know what was her residence before this? Where was she residing? I'm sorry?
Ganga's head.
Sorry?
So Shiva's head. Shiva's head.
No.
Lord Vishnu.
Before it came to Shiva's head.
At the feet of Lord Vishnu.
No residence there.
Lord Brahma.
Lord Brahma's Kamandal, yes, correct. So basically, you may recall the story of Lord, which incarnation?
Vamandev.
Lord Vamandev, thank you. He had pierced the boundary between the Virja river, the causal ocean, and the material universe. So a hole had appeared, and the water from causal ocean was dropping. And Brahma was there who collected this in his Kamandalu. So it was there. And she said, I'll ask Brahma to pour the water. I'll come down, but you can imagine how high Brahmalok is. When I come to planet Earth, it'll be with so much force that the Earth will leave its axis. And I'll go through the Earth into Patal Lok, which is another 7 planetary systems below. And she said, I don't want to do that. So you have to first make an arrangement for somebody to hold my force. Yeah, I'm coming to that. So she said, first thing is that you have to agree to find a way where I can land without causing all this damage. And then she said, once I'm there on Earth, all these sinful people will take bath. And because of my purification powers, they'll be purified, but I'll collect their sins. So very soon I'll be full of sins. And I don't want that. So here are 2 conditions. Bhagirath, I'm happy to come down. But you got to find a place for me where I can land without causing this damage. And B, you got to do something about me not having to contain all the sinful reactions of these rascals who come to take bath. So Bhagirath said, my dear mother Ganges, don't worry about anything, you come down. I'm going to please Lord Shiva to hold you when you come down, and he will be completely able to control the waves of your water on his head. And regarding your second point, I assure you that when pure devotees bathe in your water, all the sinful reactions that have collected in you will be counteracted. So you'll not have to accumulate the sinful reactions of these, rascals. So she then says, under those conditions, I'm agreeing, and you tell me when to come. So then then Bhagirath performs severe austerities to satisfy Lord Shiva. Now Lord Shiva is known as Ashutosh. What does the word Ashutosh mean?
Easily pleased.
Yes, easily pleased, easily satisfied. So very quickly, Lord Shiva was pleased and he said, what would you like? So Bhagirath explained his problem and made the request to please hold Mother Ganges when she descends from Brahmalok to planet Earth. So Lord Shiva agreed that he'll check the force of the Ganges when she arrives by getting her entangled in his hair. Excuse me. So Mother Ganges descended to earth. She got caught in the hair of Lord Shiva, and then upon the request of Bhagirath, Lord Shiva took out one strand of his hair and released the flow of Ganges from one strand of the hair, not everything, because that would be a disaster. And so with great force, Ganges started flowing. So Bhagirath mounted a very swift chariot and he was running ahead of Ganges, basically show the way where he needed to go. So there was Mother Ganges following. And she was purifying everything, on the way. And then she went to an area near Navadvip Dham. Navadvip Puri, I should say, in a place called Janudvip. Does anybody know what happened there?
Jannu Rishi was living there, Prabhu.
Very
And
good.
because-
Yes, what happened?
And because he was doing a yajna there, or he was in meditation, I think. because when Ganges came with so much force, he got disturbed, and then he drank her in order to contain her. And then Bhagirathan again had to request Janu Maharishi to let go of her, and then he agreed, and then he let her out through his ears, and that's why to this day she's even called Janavi. She became the daughter of Janu Maharishi, and she's called as Janavi.
Yes, thank you. Very good. So yeah, basically what Mother said is right. The only difference from what I understood was that he was meditating, and his Achman Patra, which is the pot that you do Achman from, Mother Ganges took it with her. It flew away. And when Janu noticed that, he drank the whole flow of Ganges in his mouth, from his mouth. Now, so go back to the scene. King Bhagirath is literally flying in his chariot, and he's hearing this loud sound of the flow, the great flow of the Ganges, and he's going, focusing on where he's going, hearing the sound, and suddenly there's no sound. So he realized that his chariot turned around, there's no Ganges. So comes back and finally realizes what has happened, because Ganges stops at the ashram of Janu Rishi. So then he understands what happened. So he offers his prayers to him, praises him, and as Mother said, he released Ganges, and that's why she's also known as Janhavi, and the place is called Janhudvip. So one of the 9 dvipas there in Navadvip is Janhudvip. That's the hermitage of Janhudvip, Janu Rishi, and it's still there, by the way. So next time you go to Navadvip Dham, you can take a tour and go visit this place where a Rishi had drank the entire Ganges as it's flowing so hard. Anyway, so Bhagirath got the Ganges back, and he flew in his chariot. Flew, I'm just using in a not literal sense, but very, very fast, and got to the place where his forefathers were. And she basically flowed over the ashes of the forefathers, who were the sons of Sagar, and they were, receiving the water. They were delivered, and they went to the heavenly kingdoms. Okay, I'm going to pause again, see if there's any questions or comments before moving forward.
Yeah, I have a question, Prabhu. Ganges, she told like she won't take the sinful activities done by the people on the earth, right? But later on,
no, she will. That was her concern, that she will end up with all sinful reactions.
Okay. But but that will get nullified if pure devotees comes and
that's correct.
So
pure devotees, purify the place. Yes.
Yeah. If we take now the existing world, I mean existing people, is it? I mean, I'm always saying there will be more sinful activities that might be happening, and she always takes all the sinful activities, and pure devotees are less. And
it takes only one pure devotee to purify the whole thing. So
okay.
I'm sure at least one pure devotee is still around. And I remember also Vyasdev is still there. He's taking bath in the Ganges. Other famous Rishis, Narayana is still there. So I don't think you have to worry about that. You're safe, bro.
Okay. Thanks. Thank you, bro.
Sure, no problem. Anybody else?
Prabhu, even Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had bathed in Ganges when he was king.
That's right. And he took bath almost every day in the river Ganges. Okay. All right. So we move on. Excuse me. So now, descendants of Bhagirath. So a few generations later, there was a king by the name of Saudas. So once the king Saudas went to the forest, and he ran into a man-eater Rakshasa. Actually, there were 2 of them. So he killed one, but he forgave the brother of the one that he killed. And so brother left, but he was very upset and he wanted to take revenge. So he disguised himself as the cook and got hired as in the kitchen of the king as the cook. And one day, Vasishtha Muni, who was the spiritual master of King Saudas, was invited for dinner. And this Rakshasa, the brother of the one that Saudas had killed, he cooked and mixed human flesh with what he cooked and offered it to Vasishtha Muni. So Vasishtha Muni is very powerful. When the food was served to him, he examined it, and by his mystic power, he knew, excuse me, that this food is not fit for him to eat. There is a part of the content is human flesh. So he became very angry, and he thought the king himself was playing some tricks on him. So he cursed him to become a man-eater. You know, you're serving your spiritual master human flesh, so I curse you to become a man-eater yourself. So Saudas explained that, look, I'm very sorry, my dear spiritual master. It wasn't me, I had no idea. And Vasishtha understood that that it was the Rakshasa, the cook, not the king. So he said that, you know, I cannot take my curse back, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to perform severe austerities for 12 years. Allow me to cleanse myself from having cursed you wrongfully, and to also get rid of the curse I've given you after I've finished my austerities. So, fine. And but King Saudas was very upset, you know, that he got cursed undeservedly. So he took some water in his hand, chanted what's known as curse mantra, or sharp mantra, and he was going to curse his own guru. But his wife Madhyanti, you know, was a wise woman. She forbade him to do such. She said, you can't curse your own guru. You know, stop doing this. So he didn't. Anyway, so because of this curse, Saudas became a man-eater. And when he became a man-eater, a very large black spot appeared on his leg, which is considered like a blemish. So he got a nickname of Kalmashpad. Kalmash means blemish, basically. So he got nickname Kalmashpad. Anyway, so one day he was wandering around the forest, and he saw a Brahmin couple, you know, enjoying themselves. And when he saw that, his Rakshasa mentality or propensity, you know, came out. He was hungry, so he grabbed the Brahmin, and he was going to devour him. But the Brahmin's wife pleaded with him in so many ways. You know, you are a king. It doesn't become you to eat a Brahmin. You know, also we were engaged in the process of getting a son. I have no children. This was our opportunity to have a son, and you're taking it away from him. Please spare his life. But Saudas said, no way, and he ate him up. And so the wife cursed him, and he said, I curse you that if you ever engage in sex, you will die immediately. So Saudas was, you know, took it seriously, and he remained sonless for those 12 years. But even after he was released from the curse, he still remained sonless because he didn't dare to be with his wife. So Vasishtha Muni was visiting, and Saudas spoke to his wife, got her consent, and requested Vasishtha Muni to produce a child with his wife, Madhyanti. So now Madhyanti got pregnant, but for some reason, and it wasn't clear from Srimad Bhagavatam, she didn't deliver it. She bore the child for many, many years and did give birth. I don't know whether she could not give birth for some reason or did not want to, but anyway, the point is she remained pregnant for many, many years. So finally, one day, Vasishtha Muni took a stone and struck her abdomen with that, and a son was born from that blow. and that son was named Ashma. And again, Ashma means stone in Sanskrit. So one who's born out of stone or because of stone is known Ashma. So he became King Ashma. He had a son whose name was Balik. And this happened at the time of Parashuram. Now, who was the, as a whole group, an enemy of Lord Parashuram that he eliminated completely?
Kshatriyas?
Kshatriyas, yes. So Lord Parashuram, having gotten angry with Kshatriyas for the death of his father, had eliminated all the Kshatriya kings from earth. But Ashmak was also Kshatriya, but he was always surrounded by many women. And so they basically acted like a kavach, a shield for him. And so he was known as Nari Kavach. Now, Parashuram did not want to penetrate the shield of women, so he left him alone. So when he killed all the Kshatriyas from the world, Ashmak was the one left as only Kshatriya. So he basically became the father of all the subsequent Kshatriyas. And one of his descendants was King Katwanga. Katwanga Prabhu ki jai. And so Katwanga Prabhu, King Katwanga is very famous for having helped the demigods in fighting with the demons. And he fought for many, many years, and he helped the demigods achieve victory over the demons. So at the end of the battle, the demigods said, "We want to give you a benediction. Please ask for anything you want." But King Katwanga, before he asked for a benediction, he said, "Well, before I ask, tell me how long I have to live." And they said, "You only have a few moments to live." So he immediately left when he heard that, left the heavenly planets, returned to his own abode, and focused or meditated upon the Lord. And those few moments he had, he focused so hard, fixed his mind so hard on the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he achieved liberation and went to spiritual world. So that's the story there. Now comes the descendants of Katwanga, King Katwanga. So very quickly, his son was Dirbhavu, whose son was Raghu. And as you know, this dynasty is known as Raghu dynasty also. The son of Raghu was Aja, son of Aja was Dashrath. And who was the son of Dashrath? Anybody?
Son of Dashrath?
Yes.
Ram.
Yes, Lord Ram. Lord Ram.
That was a very hard question, Prabhu.
I know, that's what I thought. I just want to make sure everyone is awake. Is he really asking that question? You know?
Yeah.
How can we not pay attention when it's you, Prabhu?
Thank you, Mother. Thank you. So anyway, in these next two chapters, chapter 10 and 11, Shukadeva Goswami describes in very brief the past life of Lord Ramchandra, and he says that, look, everybody in India has heard it so many times that no use telling you what you already know, you got only limited time. So he very quickly talks about different pastimes of Lord Ramchandra, and we discussed this over two classes not too long ago. You know, he talked about how Vishwamitra had come to Dashrath to take Ramchandra away, to help kill the demons who were disturbing his fire sacrifices. And having taken them, he had gone to Mithila, where he got them married to Mother Sita and her three sisters. And then Lord Ram was exiled on request of Kaikeyi. You know, in the forest, they cut off the nose and ears of Shurpanakha. And then Ravana had kidnapped Mother Sita, and they went to Sri Lanka. You know, all the stories that we discussed already, he described in very short. And then finally, Lord Ram came back with Mother Sita to Ayodhya, where he was welcomed by King Bharat, who returned his sandals and the kingdom to rule. And then talks about how Lord Ram gave Vibhishan the right to rule Lanka, and he started ruling, and he was wandering around the streets disguised. He had some dhobi, the washerman, makes a very disparaging remarks about Mother Sita. So he asked Lakshman to take her to the forest, leave her in front of the habitat of Valmiki, and the whole story about how she lived there, and was raised by Valmiki, and then she basically submerged herself under the earth because she felt that she had to prove her chastity 1 times too many. And, all those past stuff that we discussed were described in chapters 10 and 11. Finally, in chapter 12, Lav and Kush were the 2 children of Lord Ram. So chapter 12 describes the names of all the descendants of Kush. And final chapter that we're going to cover today, chapter 13, he talks about King Nimi, who's also in the same succession, actually a son of Ikshvaku, so way before Lord Ram. And talks about how when King Nimi was going to perform a great sacrifice, he appointed Vashishta, his Kulguru, to be the chief priest. But Vashishta refused. He said, I have already committed to Indra to perform a yajna for him, so you have to wait until I come back after finishing Indra's fire sacrifice. But Maharaj Nimi did not want to wait. He thought life is so short, who knows what will happen tomorrow, there's no need to wait. And he appointed another priest to perform the yajna. Soon, Vashishta Muni, after performing the yajna for Indra, returned and became very angry when he realized that the fire sacrifice had been done already by somebody else. And he got so angry that he cursed King Nimi, may your body also fall down. May your body fall down. You die. So King Nimi was so upset with that, saying, I'm innocent. I curse you that may you also die. So both King Nimi and Vashishta gave up their body at that. And Vashishta, of course, was born again. Another story about how actually he was the son of two men, Mitra and Varuna we just talked about. They got excited when they saw Urvashi and Apsara. And so their, semen was collected in a pot, and then Vashishta was born. And there were priests who wanted to revive Nimi, but he said, no, I'm done. Don't revive me. So they preserved his body with the chemicals and all that until the sacrifice was over. And then they churned his body. And from that body was another personality born by the name of Janak. Now this Janak is not the same as the father of Sita Devi. There was generations and generations of Janaks. So every child was given the title of Janak until the father of Sita Devi, whose actual name was Shirdhvaj, I think. And his brother was Kushadhvaj. And so it talks about all that. And that's the end of chapter 13. It's also 3 minutes before our time. So time to stop and see if there are any comments or questions or corrections for that matter.
Prabhu, I have a question. It might sound very silly, but I'm just curious. We just talked about a few weeks back. You talked about Maryada Purushottam Ram and how he set the example of how mankind should be living within their limits, and how he made the commitment to Sita Mata that he was only going to be married to her only. But then also you were mentioning, before all this, is that people had hundreds of wives, 50 wives, 100 wives. What was the reason why there were so many wives at that time? And what was the reason for so many offspring? Why was it so important to have so many offspring or so many wives?
So before I answer your question, you know that China had a policy of one child per couple for a long time. If somebody had a second child, they would be thrown in jail. This is in the 60s. And then they realized that That was not good, so they allowed 2 children. And recently they realized that their death rate is higher than their birth rate. So now they're allowing 3 children per couple. So you say, why is this guy telling me about China when I ask a question about scriptures? But my point is same reason. Remember, when we started talking about Srimad Bhagavatam, we talked about creation. And there was only one person in the material world at that time. Right? I should say universe, not material world. In the universe, only one person. Who was that?
Brahmaji.
Brahmaji. And he was given the task
To generate.
to increase the population.
Yep.
And he produced a few, like the Kumaras, Narad Muni, and Agastya Muni, and few other rishis, Lord Shiva. But he said, I alone cannot do this. This is too slow.
Mm-hmm.
So he created Shatrupa and Manu.
Yep.
Right? He said, you use the process of procreation to produce children. But they were also very slow. So he kept appointing people who were known as Prajapatis. And if they also had only one child policy, I mean, even today we'll still have a population of 100,000 in the whole world, as opposed to 7.2 billion only on this earth. So they had to produce thousands and thousands of children. And to do that, they had to have hundreds and hundreds of wives. Actually, there was one king that we talked about not too long ago. His name was Chitraketu. Does anybody remember how many wives he had?
1,000. 1,000.
Oh, Mataji, I wish. How many?
30.
Go up higher.
30,000.
10,000.
Higher.
100,000.
Higher.
Then it's 100,000.
Think really big.
1
Million.
crore.
How many millions is 1 crore?
10 million.
Yes, 10 million wives.
Wow.
10 million wives, one king. And he didn't have any children. So this is what the whole story about Angira Rishi, blessing him and his child who died right away. So you know that story. At least we covered it. Now I don't know if you remember it. Anyway, my point is, to answer your question, Alesh, is there was a need at that time to increase the population. There was instruction by the Lord basically to increase the population. So they did that. And the tradition continued. However, not everybody had so many wives. Only kings and very powerful people, rishis, they had multiple wives because they were able to handle the responsibilities of multiple wives. Unlike today, where you can't handle one, but you want to have 2, 3, or 4. So, I mean, clearly a point came where it was no longer necessary and was no longer considered appropriate. So Lord Ram came, he said, this is not Maryada. You have to have a Maryada for your wife. Therefore he said, I'll be a one-woman man. Now there were kings after him also who had multiple wives. But he said, no, I will not do that. So that's why it was exceptional situation where everybody else, even his own father had 4 wives. Actually, he had more than that, 3 wives. He had more than that, but the only 3 are talked about. So his own father had multiple wives, right? But he said, no, I won't. Neither did any of his 3 brothers. But later on, at the time of the Pandavas, everybody had multiple wives. Even Arjuna had 4 wives. Bhima had multiple wives. I think Yudhishthira had only one. It was Dharmaraj. So I don't know if I'm answering your question, but basically the need was for increasing the population, and those who had multiple wives were capable of handling multiple wives. Not like today's man. I mean, seriously, I'm not even trying to joke. Men today are not very capable men. We pretend to be capable. We pretend to be superior, but we're not. So it would be a huge mistake to allow multiple wives in today's time and age.
Muslim.
Yeah, Prabhu, that makes sense.
Sorry, Elish?
What I'm saying, Prabhu, is that it makes sense that the way you have explained it. Thank you.
Okay, sure. You're welcome. Anybody else, any questions or comments? Okay, so I have a question for you. which is going forward in the future. If I run into chapters like this where there's just a bunch of stories, should I skip them or you still want me to cover them?
Prabhu, cover them, please.
Okay.
Prabhu, please tell us all these stories. It's very interesting. I like to listen to stories.
Sure. And they are directly from Srimad Bhagavatam, so there's nothing, made up. So, and I also feel that if they are in Bhagavatam, they deserve to be heard.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else? Okay. All right then. Thank you so much, all of you, for your time and patience and attention. And we'll see you next week.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Thank you so much.
Hare Krishna Prabhu,
Hare
thank you
Krishna,
so
Prabhu.
much.
Thank you so much,
Prabhu.
Prabhu. Prabhu, thank you so much.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Prabhu, I have one quick question. Sorry. What is the YouTube channel?
I'm sorry?
What is the YouTube URL to find the rest of the videos? I didn't join from the beginning. I'd like to kind of catch up on.
Okay, so I'll send you a link. Unless I have your email, I'll send you a link.
Perfect. Thank you, Prabhu.
Sure. Anyone else? Okay, thank you so much again.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Hari Bol.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Hari Bol.
Hari Bol. Hare Krishna.